My experience in writing a heist story. A few years back, my wife and I were visiting my in-laws. They live in cattle country just outside Springfield, Missouri. My father-in-law was telling me about a nearby cattle ranch that breeds champion bulls and offers them out to stud. But look, here's the thing. As it turns out, you just can't stuff a lady cow into your Ford Fiesta and road trip it out to get down with the get down. It's expensive as hell to transport cattle, and it's not without its risks. They really gorge on the road trip snacks, they bogart the ox cord, and they have to stop every 45 minutes to take a leak. So, what's the solution? Easy. You simply give the bull the below-the-belt high five, bottle up the proceeds, and ask FedEx to zip it to the waiting lady bovine. But what if said bull is a bit of an overachiever and produces more than you need at any one moment? Well, you stuff it in the freezer and you sell it for far more than any of us would imagine bovine batter would be bartered for. And that's when I realized that less than 10 miles away, there was a walk-in freezer with literally millions of dollars worth of semen, and because I'm deeply broken inside, I immediately thought, heist! That led to me plotting out my newest book, Extraction, a fantasy heist about two people trying to steal bull semen. Comes out on December 3rd. But very quickly, I learned that my deep love of films like Rafifi, Ocean's 11, and Logan Lucky weren't so much a help as they were a hindrance. Look, in film you can hide information, you can surprise the audience, but that's a bit more challenging when you're writing a novel. I went through 5 full, wildly different drafts before I found a balance that I was happy with. Now, I want to be clear, I am not an authority on how to write heist stories. I've written a grand total of 1, so this is just the approach that worked for me. But the first thing I did was to establish the target of the heist. See, that target is going to define so much of your story. How heavy is it? How are they going to profit from the target? What will their approach be? For me, the target was bull semen, and immediately that presented a very serious issue. See, this is a fantasy story, which means no electricity, which also means no refrigeration. And fun fact about semen, it has to be kept cold if you're going to store it. In his truly excellent short story, A Year and a Day in Old Theradane, Scott Lynch builds a story in which a group of thieves are tasked with stealing an entire city street. You can see how the story immediately begins to shape itself around the object of the heist. Your characters' motivations, their plan for after they get their hands on it, how they transport it, how they profit from it. The item they're stealing is the heartbeat of your plot. Next, let's talk about security. If the object has value, it's going to be protected. And the core of your story, the fun and games section, if you're feeling like saving a cat today, is how they get past those rings of protection with the prize at the center. This is one of my favorite parts about writing a heist novel. Sometimes it can be difficult to identify the specific conflicts that your characters are going to be coming face to face with throughout the book, but laser grids and guard dogs are deliciously fun conflicts that spawn trauma and growth and bonding and all of the other things that can make a story sing. For Extraction, I placed the vial of prized bull semen in a vault in a cold cave underground at the center of a massive sprawling ranch. I then stuffed it with dozens of trained guards, dogs, layers of security, all of it. Before I even began outlining the book, I planned out the security. I built each of the walls that Aldo and Nicolette will have to find their way around, and then I got to work. And see, I think that that's the appeal of writing a heist story. We've all stood in the bank and glanced around thinking, I never would, but if I did, looking at cameras and escape routes. There's a joy in solving that puzzle and figuring out your way past the impossible. This is also, however, the place where you can find yourself standing in the corner, staring down at all that sticky paint all around you and wondering how the hell you ended up in this pickle. See, in addition to the vault and the guards and the dogs and every other damn thing, I decided to add one more wrinkle to Aldo and Nicolette's task. They needed to get past all the security, get past the lock, steal the semen, get back out, escape a ranch that's hundreds of square miles, and get their way all the way back to the city, all without anyone knowing that a single drop of moo juice has gone missing. I was delighted when I came up with that idea, but over the next few days, I came to hate that wide-eyed dipshit Dietrich who came up with the damn idea in the first place. That single choice led to more headaches than almost anything else with Extraction. Every step became more difficult. Every choice now had a new angle on it. And that's a gigantic pain in the ass for me, but I think it's nothing but good for the reader. Raising the stakes like that is always going to be the best choice for your story. And in a heist, knocking your characters back on their heels and keeping them there is going to spike the tension to absolutely delicious levels. And if you can thread that needle between keeping the stakes higher than a community college art teacher while finding a way for your characters to still reach the finish line, you'll have something truly special. You've got your target, you've got your security, and after bashing your head against your keyboard over and over and over again, you finally figured out the plan. And if you're like me, you can't wait to dazzle your readers with your brilliance. Have them reach the part of the book where you straighten your bow tie, wink at them, and perform your big reveal. It's the twist at the end of Ocean's 11, the reveal of the con at the end of the Thomas Crown Affair. I know for me, it was the moment I was most excited about, but I have some bad news. It may not work out the way you hope. See, hiding information from your audience can work in a 2-hour film a lot better than it can in a full-length novel. Every time I tried to be coy or sly about the secret behind Aldo and Nicolette's plan, my beta readers didn't really find it clever, they found it annoying. It took some work for me to understand a very simple truth. See, your readers don't need to be the audience to your heist, they actually need to be a part of the heist. They need to be in on the plan from the beginning. They need to know how the plan is supposed to go, all the misdirects, all the red herrings. In a heist film, the joy comes from the surprise, but in a novel, your readers are walking the same path that your characters do. The tension should not come from not knowing what they're trying to do. The tension should come from knowing the plan and then seeing all of the ways that it blows up in their face. For example, one of the elements that I introduced was that Aldo was just a bucket of childhood trauma due to the minor inconvenience of being abandoned by his father before he had hair below his belt to spend a decade and a half in a walking nightmare of a prison ship. Someone like that is not a Danny Ocean. They're not a Thomas Crown. Emotionally, Aldo has the stability of a Jenga tower about 25 moves into the game, and he makes stupid and rash decisions. And look, just because your characters have the perfect plan doesn't mean that things are going to play out exactly as they hope. In fact, if they do, your story's going to be pretty damn boring. I said your reader needs to be part of the crew, and that means they get to see the plan blow up in your characters' faces, and they need to see your characters desperately change direction, solve the problem, find a new path forward, and that's the tension in your story. It's not the reveal at the end of how your heroes had it all figured out the whole time. It's all the missteps and mistakes that happen along the way, all the ways that the plan goes wrong, and how Aldo and Nicolette still find their way to the prize despite all of that. And so I had my target. I planned the security, I plotted out the heist, and I invited the reader to come over to the table covered in blueprints and foreshadowing. Every one of my pieces was in place, and I wrote 90,000 words of heisty goodness. Finally had my draft ready to read. I set it aside for a few weeks, as I usually do, and then I sat down to read my bull semen masterpiece, and I absolutely hated it. From a technical perspective, it was fine, but it was boring. It was flat. It read like a hollow recitation of events, like a police report, and I came to the end realizing I just could not possibly give less of a shit about these characters. So I spent a few days feeling sorry for myself and debating deleting the entire book, moving on to a different story, before I came to my senses and I reached out to some writer friends and asked for help. And it didn't take long for all of us to figure out the truth. You can have all of the elements of a heist, but you're still writing a story, which means the characters have to be the heartbeat, their relationships, their growth, their evolution as characters. Look, in that draft that I put together, Aldo didn't make a decision for himself until 90% through the book. He was going through the motions. So I started from the beginning, and I looked at what I needed to do to make my readers just give a shit about him. They had to invest in him, to want him to find success and happiness at the end of the road, and everything else really had to be in service to that. From him learning to trust someone for the first time, to coming face to face with the father who abandoned him, to realizing the consequences of his actions. The reality is that all of the things that I've talked about, the target, the plan, the security, all of those have to be in service to those characters. And what I discovered was the heart is not the heist. It was a broken man who wants to do the right thing but has no idea how. About learning that the consequences of our actions don't always hit us, but can leave those we love most bleeding out on the deck. It was about Aldo coming face to face with the truth of his past and learning that things are just never as black and white as we think. Look, Extraction was one of the hardest books that I've ever written. But I also think that it's some of the best writing that I've ever done. There's a reason that heist stories are so universally loved. They are storytelling boiled down to its purest form. A hero with their back against the wall, an impossible task, overcoming the system to find your fortune, having everything stacked against you and still finding a way to beat the house. I mean, it's kind of what we all want to do with our own dreams. I'm an indie author. I don't have a huge publisher. I don't have a massive audience. I dream of a day where people read and love my stories, even though the statistics say it's likely never to happen. So I plan, and I dream, and like everyone else who sits down to tell their story, I hope to one day beat the odds. And here's the thing, if it does happen, I know that it's not going to look anything like I thought it would, but maybe it's okay that I don't know how the job's going to play out, because knowing what comes next, I mean, where's the fun in that?